Right. So, friends, we're blessed to be here with Scott Richman, who is Regional Director of the Anti-Defamation League's New York and New Jersey regions. And he is somebody who has walked with our congregation and many others through very complicated moments and is once again working tirelessly to make sure that we can navigate this particular moment with everything happening in Israel and in Gaza right now. Suffice it to say that there are a lot of rebounds happening in New York City and in California and all across the country. And so it is wonderful to hear from him. He brings a wealth of experience in the Jewish nonprofit sector and also as a lay leader. And so, Scott, thank you so much. Thank you for giving of your time and your wisdom this evening.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for this group for being on. It's a relatively small group, so I can speak for a bit, but maybe if we want to have more of a discussion, I am totally open to that. But I'll make some initial remarks. From my vantage point, I don't have to rehash any of the circumstances of what happened with the terrorist attack. That's not really my job tonight. From my vantage point, I'm going to talk a bit about the fallout as I see it, especially in this country. We are being inundated with requests for us to reach out to companies, to reach out to schools, to reach out to universities, to reach out to anybody and everybody who has not made a strong enough statement. And unfortunately, we are seeing that so many are making very equivocal statements, statements that they want to make because they want to see this through a certain lens where, we're opposed to violence and we're opposed to hate, and there's violence and hate on both sides, and it's terrible that people have lost their lives, and that sort of thing, and not really seeing how incredibly exceptional this moment is, even drawing a moral equivalency between the Hamas terrorists who perpetrated this act and the civilians who were the victims of it, who were butchered, who were slaughtered, who were raped, who were kidnapped. The stories are truly horrific. I do a podcast. It's called From the Front Lines. My podcast has been devoted to ADL's work since I've been doing a podcast since 2014, but I retooled it when I came to ADL. And for the past 2.5 years, I've been doing a podcast that really featured ADL's work. In the moment, I decided that I had to do something different. And this week, yesterday, I released my first podcast of a new series, and that new series is focused on Israel. I decided I needed to exclusively focus on Israel. So I reached out to an organization, a very special organization, that has become the entity, or one of the entities, which is galvanizing the volunteers in Israel, called Brothers and Sisters for Israel. It's an enormous civil society undertaking that is volunteering in so many different ways. And you can listen to my podcast. I can circulate the link, but it's 24 minutes, and it includes not only what they're doing, but what they're encountering. And that the horrific stories, that word does not even begin to describe what the person I was interviewing, who's one of the leaders of this group, what their volunteers are encountering as they're going into the South, as they're working with the victims, as they're working with the families. The individual stories, as I'm sure you're all seeing on social media or in newspapers, it boggles the mind. And the sort of moral equivalency, this desire to see this conflict through the lens of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is really wholly inappropriate. This doesn't look like that. This isn't about the sort of issues that we're having with land. This isn't about the issues that checkpoints. any facet of this conflict that you can think about, this is about an extremist group, a terrorist entity, whose sole mission it is to murder Jews and to take the entire, to wipe this Israelis into the, or push Israelis into the sea. If I were a Palestinian, I would be condemning this group. I mean, no group has been harmed more by Hamas than the Palestinians themselves. This is an extremist group. It doesn't speak for them, for most of them. And the ways that they've acted are so beyond the pale. If this were a Jewish group, a Jewish extremist group, I would be the first one to be speaking out. And what we're seeing in this country is a complete lack of understanding of that. They're putting it through the lens of the conflict and seeing it through the lens of many decades of different wars, different actions, different conflicts, and saying, once again, the Israelis and Palestinians are at it, and once again, we decry violence. This is not that moment. It simply is not. And for whatever reason, there is a public out there that wants to see it that way. Maybe it's too painful to see it for what it is, or maybe they're using it for their own ends, or maybe they are simply good people who don't who are not aware enough of the situation, of the actors, of the geography, of the history, to be able to understand what happened. But I've been dealing with this literally all week. That's one facet of this. Second facet of it is the fact that we have seen a virtual avalanche of anti-Israel and anti-Semitic content wherever you look. So online, for example, ADL monitors many groups and many sites, and we are seeing an incredible amount of extremely offensive content, including, but not limited to, support for Hamas. Very clear support, celebrating what Hamas has done. You may have seen this article in something called the Electronic Intifada by a professor named Massad, who's a Columbia professor. It's a screed against Israel, and it is a full-throated support for Hamas. And unfortunately, it's the kind of thing that people can hold up and say, this is a serious scholar, a serious academic, and he is 100% supporting this. We have reached out to Columbia University and asked them to condemn it. I'll be honest about that. And they are not there yet. I think we have to get them there, but they are not there yet. And that is extremely unfortunate. I don't think it's because they agree with it. I think they certainly do condemn it. It's just a question of how the university wants to handle a situation like that. So we're seeing this certainly on social media from the left. We're also seeing it from the right. We've seen a huge uptick in anti-Semitic content coming from the right. In fact, immediately, as soon as this began on Saturday, we saw a 500% increase in anti-Semitic content on Telegram. We see this frequently where the extreme left and the extreme right meet in the middle. It comes all the way around, and anti-Semitism is the one place that draws them both together, something they can both agree on. So that is extremely troubling. We have seen a very serious uptick in incidents being reported to my office. You realize that ADL is an office or an entity that responds to anti-Semitic incidents. We get incidents reported to us on a daily basis. Last year, we had 2,200 incidents reported to my office, New York, New Jersey. So, all right, well, we can get to that, but But the point is, that's what we do. I have this past week, we had 100 incidents reported to the office. So that's about double the maximum we really ever would get. And that has completely overwhelmed my staff. Now, I cannot say that every one of them was an anti-Semitic incident. There are people who are reporting all sorts of things like what I mentioned before. My school is not speaking out loudly enough, or here's what they said. And that's not really an anti-Semitic incident. They're looking for help, and they're using the incident response portal to get that help. But nevertheless, we need to act on all of them, and that's a huge uptick, and we're making our way through them. We have seen quite a number of rallies. In fact, we're monitoring this immediately, even though it was Shabbat when this happened, even though it was Chag when it happened, we're monitoring it immediately. And by Sunday, there were 39 pro-Hamas rallies planned across the nation. So we're talking about the fact that this was ongoing on Saturday. The terrorists were still doing their atrocious acts. And at the same time, there were groups in this country who were organizing rallies for the next day. And it's continued, and it does continue. We see lots of rallies scheduled for this week. It's ramping up. On Friday, rally in Times Square. That enormous pro-Hamas rally in Times Square ended at 5, so they could march across town to stand in front of the Israeli consulate. Our office happens to be around the corner from the Israeli consulate. They happen to walk along 40th Street, which is where our office is. And suddenly I was hearing Free Palestine enveloping me while I was sitting at my desk. And I went outside, and there were a lot of very, very angry people chanting a lot of things. I was looking at the signs. It was interesting. And many of them had absolutely nothing to do with Hamas, with Gaza. They were all sorts of signs related to the West Bank or different towns in the West Bank. Like, I think people really have no sense of exactly what's going on here. They see it as an opportunity to press for a two-state solution, which, by the way, I 100% agree with the two-state solution. I will tell you the line that Senator Schumer told us at a small meeting. About 20 of us met with Senator Schumer on Friday. Senator Schumer was in China on up until Thursday night. He returned Thursday night from China. On Friday morning, he met with about 20 Jewish leaders, and he said to us that he was pressing Israel's case with the Chinese, and he was speaking with Xi Jinping, the premier of China, and he was talking about this, and Xi Jinping said something about how, we in China believe in the two-state solution. And Senator Schumer said, yes, but Hamas does not. And I think it's very important to sort of focus on that. This isn't about the two-state solution. And of course, he told us that he was leaving for Israel the following morning, which is pretty remarkable. Senator Schumer should really be applauded. Returning from China is no easy feat, and then leaving for Israel the following morning, it takes an extraordinary degree of stamina. And he was there until today, and he's coming back. And the reason he's coming back so quickly is because, in his own words, I need to lead the Senate. I need to make sure that Israel has everything it needs, that it has money for ammunition and money for the Iron Dome, and everything that it could possibly require. And hopefully, and here I'm speaking on behalf of ADL, hopefully an ambassador that is approved. That unfortunately, Ambassador Nides was an excellent ambassador for the US and Israel, and we are left without an ambassador at this terrible time in Israel. Jack Lew, the former Treasury Secretary, has been nominated. All of the Senate nominations for all of the ambassadorial posts, including several in the Middle East, I think even in Saudi Arabia, have been held up by the Republicans, who are not pleased that Democrats are appointing all of these ambassadors. And this is not the moment for that. So I think he's hopeful that he can get it pushed through. The other thing I want to mention is Well, so I was getting to a point, though, about this issue of anti-Semitism. We know from the past, especially in the recent past, with the Israel-Hamas conflict in 2021, that this terrible rhetoric, the loss of innocent lives in Gaza, which we're already witnessing, which is horrific as well. Um, Obviously, Israel has complete right to defend itself, and I agree 100% that Israel has to do what it has to do, but it's still very sad when innocent lives are lost. Um, that that when that happens, there is a corresponding rise in anti-Semitism around the world. We are already seeing it in France, a large number of incidents in the UK, in many parts of Europe. We are seeing it in this country. It hasn't quite reached any kind of level that is extremely alarming, but we're beginning to see the several incidents. My suspicion is that as soon as there is a ground incursion, we are going to see a huge rise in anti-Semitic incidents. The ground is being laid by all of this rhetoric on social media, everything that's out there, by the rallies, and we're doing our best to make sure that law enforcement is prepared. We've certainly, in terms of the NYPD, had many meetings with the NYPD up to the level of the commissioner, who is extremely concerned about this. I will say the mayor as well, and I'm sure you've seen the mayor is extremely strong, really one of the best advocates. He was just in Israel a few weeks ago, and really feels it deeply. And the last thing I think I'm going to talk about is the fact that, and I don't have to tell this group, that we are in a moment of already very heightened sensitivity to anti-Semitism. The past decade, which is really where the timeline in terms of ADL, ADL traces this to about 2013, the rise in anti-Semitism in this country, and we've watched it slowly rise. 2022, according to our audit, which is really the gold standard by which everybody takes the temperature of anti-Semitism in this country, elected officials and media and business and everybody, because it's quoted back to me all the time. 2022 was the highest year on record since ADL has been keeping track. 2021 was a record. 2019 was a record. We only had a slight dip in 2020 because of the pandemic, but only a slight dip, 4%. We have seen a steady increase, and not even by a small amount. From 2021 to 2022, it went up 1,000 incidents, 36% increase, huge jumps. And I can tell you, because I'm witnessing it all the time, 2023 is not going to be better. We also saw today the release of the FBI hate crimes data. So I don't know how many of you are aware that it was released at 10 a.m. this morning. That's a big release. We'll see how much visibility it gets. FBI hate crimes data is the way that everybody looks at the state of hate, not necessarily anti-Semitism, but the state of hate in this country, and is based on crimes. So it must be a crime to make it in there. A crime, something for which you can call the police, you can get arrested. Now, many acts of anti-Semitism are not crimes, and ADL in its audit keeps track of both hate incidents and hate crimes. So many speech-related things. So if somebody comes up to you on the street and calls you a dirty Jew, that is not a hate crime. It's free speech. Nothing will happen to that person. You can call the police, but nothing is going to happen. But it is certainly anti-Semitic, and it is certainly hateful, and it would certainly make it into our audit. So the hate crimes data showed that there was a very significant, a 37% increase in hate crimes against Jews from 2021 to 2022. Their data refers to 2022. It shows a very significant jump in terms of incidents in New York, almost 200 more incidents or hate crimes. It shows New Jersey being number 2 across the nation with more hate crimes against Jews than New York, which was really shocking to me. But we our audit always has New York being number one across the nation. The FBI hate crimes data for anti-Semitism was California being number one, followed by New York, followed by New Jersey. So really, really difficult to see that. We should all be aware, though, that the group that suffers the most in terms of hate crimes is not the Jewish community. We suffer disproportionately, meaning we're very small. We're 2% of the population. There's another 98% of the population, 2%. But we occupy about 10% of the hate crimes in this country. That's really disproportionate. But the group, in an absolute sense, that suffers the most is the Black community. So racist acts against the Black community, hate crimes against the Black community, are the largest chunk by far. Like 3 times the number of those against the Jewish community. LGBTQ is around the same number as the Jewish community. So we're in a moment that had already had us totally on edge. We're just coming off of these horrific swatting incidents. So I spent my summer dealing with this. These were threats that were called into 911 that there was a bomb in a synagogue or that there was a gunman in a synagogue. These were false threats. None of these institutions were ever physically in danger, but the hope was that the SWAT team would come in with their ambulances, with their fire trucks, with their police cars, guns blazing, and totally disrupt. And they were looking for chaos. This was not something that happened in isolated instances. It happened all over New York City. It happened all over the nation. Just about every Shabbat, I was focused on this. The NYPD was extraordinary through this. I worked very closely with the chief of intelligence for all of those weeks. Several of the perpetrators have now been caught. You may have seen there was a big press release about the one in Peru who had perpetrated these acts on during Rosh Hashanah. 150 false bomb threats, not just to Jewish institutions, but also to hospitals, to schools, airports, shopping malls. Really, really horrific. So Jewish community was most certainly already on edge before this, and the swatting incidents made it much worse. There are quite a number of synagogues that were evacuated during Rosh Hashanah, which is terrible. And that's the moment we're in. And to come to this point and have already a huge amount of anti-Semitism, anti-Israel statements online, it just stands to reason that we have to be vigilant. I think we all play such an important role of being ambassadors for Israel in this country and making sure that people are not engaging in moral equivalency, that people are calling this out for what it is, that everybody in our orbit, whether it's a corporation or a school or our neighbors, that everybody understands the gravity of this situation. And there are a lot of resources on ADL's website if you want to learn more or know what ADL is seeing, what our Center on Extremism, really the intelligence arm of the Jewish community, is seeing. We have a landing page, a new landing page. It's called We Stand With Israel. So I can get to the link, but if you just put in ADL, We Stand With Israel, you'll come to it. Just about every day since this started, we have posted a new blog. And that blog basically has all of the information, the data that our intelligence arm is gleaning from social media and other places, and you can really delve much more deeply. And each day we'll put out a new one. And there's a lot of other important pieces there. Some of you may have seen our CEO, Jonathan Greenblatt, on Morning Joe, on the Squawk Box, on CNN. So there are clips on there that are very powerful. He's really been an extraordinary spokesperson, not just for ADL, but really for the Jewish people. He spoke at a synagogue here in New York City on Shabbat. He received a standing ovation. I've never quite seen that before. And really, it's a moment for us to really feel united around these messages and to go forward empowered to to step up in this moment. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I think I'm gonna hit pause on this so we can speak openly together and more spontaneously on the recording.